Senator Murphy.
Mr. President, I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Members, as usual, will you be so kind as to stand? And members, today's chaplain is Reverend John Herdlinger from Gustavus Adolphus Lutheran Church in St. Paul. Following the prayer, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good afternoon. Together we pray. Almighty One, watch over these senators and all their going out and their coming in. Keep all evil away from all they do, and let them share the hospitality of this great state who all visit and call Minnesota home. We humbly ask you for your goodness to us and for all that you have made. We praise you, mighty Creator, for all creation, for keeping us in all things in your care, and for all the blessings of our lives. Give us awareness of your mercy so that we go about this important work you have called us to do with thankful hearts. Finally, loving God, give us the grace to set a good example to all among whom we live and work, to be just and true in all our dealings and mindful of all that call this place home. We ask you to guide each conversation and decision that is made by these leaders who continue to work for the needs of all. This we ask in your holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, members. The secretary will take the roll.
Abler, Anderson, Barr, Bolden, Carlson, Champion, Coleman, Swadzinski, Dames, Dibble, Dornick, Draheim, Drazkowski, Duckworth, Diedzik, Eichhorn, Farnsworth, Fateh, Frentz, Green, Grunhagen, Gustafson, Hochschild, Herr, Hoffman, Housley, Howe, Jasinski, Johnson, Klein, Coran, Kroon, Kunish, Kupek, Lang, Latz, Liskey, Limmer, Lucero, Mann, Marty, Matthews, Mayquaid, McEwen, Miller, Mitchell, Mohammed, Morrison, Murphy, Nelson, Umuver-Baton, Pappas, Pa, Port, Pratt, Putnam, Rarick, Rasmussen, Rest, Seeberger, Utke, Weber, Wiesenberg, Westland, Westrom, Wickland, Zhang.
Members, pursuant to Rule 14.1, the following members intend to vote under Rule 40.7. Diedzik, McEwen, Miller, Mitchell. Members, a quorum is present. Members, if you care to follow along, as you know, I'm reading from the Senate agenda dated Tuesday, April 11th. And we will begin with the fifth order of business, reports of committees. Senator Murphy, for the motion to adopt committee reports.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the committee reports printed in the agenda be adopted, and I ask for a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Any discussion? Seeing none, the secretary will take the roll. Members, please vote. Senator Jasinski.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There's 43 ayes and 16 noes. The motion prevails. Members, we will now proceed to the sixth order of business, which is the second reading of Senate bills. The secretary will read the Senate file numbers.
Senate file numbers 1258, 30, 3, and 63.
The Senate files have been given their second reading. Members, we'll now proceed to the seventh order of business, second reading of House bills. The secretary will read the House file numbers.
House file numbers 62, 1486, and 1581.
The House files have been given their second reading. Members, will now proceed to the eighth order of business, which is the introduction and first reading of Senate bills. The bills listed on today's introduction calendar are given their first reading and referred as indicated. Members, now proceeding to the ninth order of business, which is motions and resolutions. We will adopt the author's motions as one motion. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate File number 910 be withdrawn from the Committee on Jobs and Economic Development and re-referred to the Committee on Capital Investment. This is my bill. I've spoken with each chair and both agree.
Any discussion? Senator Seeberger moves that Senate File 910 be withdrawn from the Committee on Jobs and Economic Development and re-referred to the Committee on Capital Investments. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. Senator Friends?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the amendment made to House File number 1656 by the committee.
Not yet, Senator.
Then I don't move that, Mr. President.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that House File 1278 be taken from the table.
And are you requesting a roll call vote?
And I request a roll call vote.
A roll call requested, a roll call granted. On that motion, the secretary will take the roll if there are no discussion. Seeing none, the secretary will take the roll. Members, please vote.
You know what this one is? Huh? You know what this is? Yes?
Members, please vote. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Anyone else before we close the roll? All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 53 ayes and 0 noes. The motion to take the bill from the table is adopted or prevails. Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that House File 1278 be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Are you requesting a roll call vote?
And I request a roll call.
A roll call vote has been requested. Roll call granted. Any discussion on that motion? The secretary will take the roll. Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes no. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 42 ayes and 11 noes. The motion prevails. Remaining under the order of business of motions and resolutions, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bill be made a special order for immediate consideration.
Thank you so very much, Senator Murphy. Senator Friends.
Why, thank you, Mr. President. I move that the amendment made to House File number 1656 by the Committee on Rules and Administration in the report adopted on March 30th, 2023, pursuant to Rule 45, be stricken. And I ask for a roll call.
Just so that we're clear, we are on House File 1656. Senator Friends moved that the amendment be made to House File 1656 by the Committee on Rules and Administration in the report adopted on March 30th, 2023, pursuant to Rule 45, be stricken. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. Hold it. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. He requested a roll call. Roll call. Requested roll call. Granted. That's what they're trying to tell me. I see my wonderful Senator Barr just wanted to make sure he got me this time. All right. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. Members, please vote. Senator Rasmussen, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes no.
Miller votes no. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, Senator Dizek votes yes,
Senator Dizek votes aye.
and Senator McCune votes aye,
Senator McEwen votes aye.
and Senator Mitchell also aye.
Senator Mitchell votes aye.
Thank you.
All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There have been 37 ayes and 21 noes. The motion to strike as Rule 45 requires prevails. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members, for your patience. I am proud to rise before you and ask for your support for House File 1656. Members, the public likes it when we do things together. The federal infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, those are things done in Washington, D.C. to help each and every state. House File 1656 provides the state competitive matching funds so that Minnesota can compete for those funds, compete with the other states, bring infrastructure to our clean energy system, and bring jobs to each of our communities. This bill will allow Minnesota utilities, Minnesota cities, Minnesota towns, Minnesota nonprofits, and the state itself to compete for federal funds. There are numerous federal silos of funds that will help each and every one of our districts. This will help us develop generation, transmission, distribution, resiliency, and efficiency, saving our Minnesota ratepayers money, providing for a greater reliability in the electric system, and moving us towards a cleaner, more carbon-free future. These are things we should do. If we don't compete for these funds, they're going to go out anyway, but they're going to go to states with names like New Jersey and Oregon and Oklahoma. Minnesota is a net payer in of tax dollars to Washington, D.C. There is no reason we should not compete successfully when federal grant programs allow. We have to provide these funds not only so that we get our fair share of the federal tax dollar, but so that we can put projects together for the next generation, for those Minnesotans that have more years to live than some of us in our 50s, to provide transmission, to provide generation. Just a few of the programs available in the IRA and the IIJA for which this fund will provide matching dollars. Carbon capture for large-scale projects. That by itself, members, is $937 million available to states like ours. For my friend Senator Gruenhagen, rural and municipal utility advanced cybersecurity grants, over $250 million, Senator, to help protect rural co-ops and municipal from cyber attack. The basics. Members, the public likes it when we do the basics. Transmission facilitation program. That's help moving electricity. $2.5 billion available to Minnesotans. And finally, for those worried about reliability, $5 billion available for the federal Preventing Outages and Enhancing Resilience grants. These are just some, Mr. President, of what's available if Minnesota can compete. How are we going to maximize Minnesota's opportunities? By passing House File 1656 today and on this floor. In the bill, you'll see that we appropriate $100 million to the Department of Commerce and establish the State Competitiveness Fund. Who doesn't like to compete? Am I right? The Competitiveness Fund allows the Department of Commerce to do two things. First of all, to allow our grant applicants, whether they're in a big community or small, whether it's for transmission or whether it's for generation, to say that the state of Minnesota has appropriated the necessary matching funds. That makes us more competitive. I don't mind pointing out, for those competitive types in the chamber, there are states in this union that have appropriated this type of money almost a year ago. That's how far behind we are. Let's stay behind no longer. The Department of Commerce also will provide $15 million of technical assistance. Let's say my community does not have a full-time grant writer available to compete for some of these grants. The Department of Commerce will provide human resource assistance, technical assistance, and outreach that allows money to go into the communities to help them write the grants. This allows communities big and small to successfully compete for these dollars. There's a priority in the bill that establishes under what priority scheme the money will be awarded by the Department of Commerce. And if you have questions about that, we can talk about that. Essentially, it starts with federal formula matching funds going directly to the state. There is no reason not to prioritize all the money that's already appropriated under the formulas. What kinds of projects are coming to your district with the use of these funds? Wind power, resiliency for the grid, legacy transmission, distribution, jobs, jobs, and jobs. With the passage of this bill, members, we'll be taking a giant step forward to allow Minnesota nonprofits, Minnesota utilities, big and small, and Minnesota communities like ours to take advantage of the matching funds, to apply successfully to these grants. And I will go on record here as saying that the $100 million appropriated in House File 1656 will not be enough, that when we see the success of the program, we'll be back here later this session acting for more. Again, members, this is for the next generation of Minnesotans to help provide for them and their infrastructure, to decarbonize and to provide lower cost with higher reliability. I ask your support on the bill, Mr. President, and members, I ask for a bipartisan yes vote.
Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Mr. President, I noticed the first action we took on this bill was to adopt the House language, and I'm wondering if Senator Frentz would yield to a question.
Senator Frentz will yield. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm wondering if Senator Frentz would tell us what the differences were between the Senate version that we passed out of committee and what the language is from the House that we just adopted.
Senator Frentz, to the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Rarick, for the excellent question. There are two differences in the House language, and I think they're both good for Minnesota. One is a reporting requirement. Members that are in the Finance Committee this morning heard discussion from Senator Draheim and others about how accountability is important with our dollars. The reporting requirement helps seek accountability. The second one, Senator Rarick, is somewhat technical, but it requires that the money, if unspent by the year 2034, would revert to the general fund, and those are the two changes in the language. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Rarick.
Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, one of the concerns we've had repeatedly so far this session is taking the exact House language and skipping the conference committees so that further work can be done. I think we've got a few amendments that we're going to be offering to this. And I would just have appreciated some ability to work a little bit more as this went on. If we pass this today, Mr. President, it's going straight to the governor's desk, and we'll be limited on our ability to make any changes that we might think about during these discussions unless an amendment is taken here on the floor today. So I would hope that with some of the amendments, members will think long and hard that as the Senate, we don't have to just do exactly what the House has done. We're the Senate. We can do our own discussion, pass a bill, and go to a conference committee to work out the differences. So thank you, Mr. President.
Any further discussion on House File 1656? Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, members, I'm just a little bit confused because the bill states that the grants may be awarded under Section 4, and it lists eligible grantees under this subdivision include regional development commissions established under Section 462-387, and the West Central Initiative Foundation, and a few others. And I'm just concerned why only one initiative foundation is listed in this bill. We have 6 initiative foundations in our state. Now, I understand the bill does say includes, so as it should say includes but not limited to. It does not say but not limited to. And so I would ask the author if he might yield and provide some insight into why only the West Central Initiative Foundation is listed as a potential grantee.
Senator Friends, will you yield for a question? He will yield for a question. To Senator Nelson's question, Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Nelson. That is an excellent question. The answer is the regional development organizations that cover certain territory were enough to allow for each part of Minnesota to be represented in the way the money's given out, except for where the West Central Initiative was, and our understanding was by putting that in, we would then be allowed to say that the entire state was covered. You also made an excellent observation that the language would include an additional entity to be provided for by the Department of Commerce, although I admit they were not named in the bill. I would be very open to that. We want everyone in every corner of Minnesota to be able to compete for these grants. Thank you, Senator Nelson, and thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and the author. I appreciate that. Just so there's no confusion, I would encourage the author to broaden his language to include all Minnesota Initiative Foundations.
Any additional discussions on House File 1656? Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I have an amendment. The A4 amendment.
Senator Gruenhagen offers the A4 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Gruenhagen moves to amend House File number 1656 as follows. Page 6, after line 12, insert. This is the A4 amendment.
Senator Gruenhagen, to your A4 amendment.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, what this does, members, it's an assessment of electrical grid's resilience against an electrical magnetic pulse, or an EMP. It would be a report that would be due from the Commissioner of Commerce by February 1, 2024. Now, I'm a lay person, but I have read a lot of articles about EMPs. In fact, one was used, according to my research, in Iraq by us to knock out the electrical and the electronic equipment permanently. So it would do it in a very short period of time. Now, there's 2 types of EMPs. One is deliberate, where, an enemy sets it off over a country and knocks out their electrical and electronic equipment instantly. In fact, some articles say that would put us back, a major EMP would put us back to the early 1800s here in this country, almost overnight. The second one is the natural. We could have a EMP attack from geometric disturbances resulting from severe space weather, if you've done some research on that. So in either case, we should find out how resilient our grid is. According to my research, we do have the technology and equipment to protect ourselves from an EMP, but we're just not implementing it. Also, according to what I've read, Minnesota has a high risk of having severe consequences from an EMP, either natural or by an enemy attack. So members, this is, I hope, to be a friendly amendment, and I would ask Senator Friends to yield for a question.
Senator Friends, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Gruenhagen.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Friends. Senator Friends, would you see this as a friendly amendment as far as the EMP study is concerned?
Senator Friends, to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Gruenhagen. I would not see it as a friendly amendment. I would see it as an important topic, but not worthy of mandating an additional report on the department. However, you have my pledge that the issue of cybersecurity is important, and I would remind the body that I have pointed out that part of the federal funds goes for rural and municipal utility advanced cybersecurity grants. And therefore, Senator Gruenhagen, I do appreciate the amendment, but I would ask members to vote no. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, thank you, Senator Friends, for that response. I do believe we need a comprehensive report. And from that report, we'll get a better assessment of what actually needs to be done. And therefore, members, I would ask for a roll call, and I would urge you to support this amendment.
Roll call requested. Roll call granted. Senator Klein.
Mr. President, I was going to request a roll call. No.
Thank you. Let's see. Senator Rarick. You done? Okay. Senator Friends. Seeing no others. The Secretary will take the roll on the A4 amendment. Members, please vote. Senator Murphy. Any question? Oh, no, I saw you up. Sorry about that. Senator Rasmussen, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, I'd like to report DZ nay.
Senator Dizik votes no.
Senator McCune, nay.
Senator McEwen votes no.
And Senator Mitchell, nay.
Senator Mitchell votes no. Any
Thank you.
additional? Members, all senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There have been 23 ayes and 34 nays. The A4 amendment is not adopted. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to offer the A1 amendment.
Senator Rarick offers the A1 amendment. The Secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Rarick moves to amend House File Number 1656 as follows. Page 2, delete line 31. This is the A1 amendment.
Senator Rarick, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the bill, we have a list of priorities for the way that we would look to distribute the money. And I think as we look at the way the priorities are listed out, I've had a little bit of concern about that. The main concern is that the state is #1 on the priority list. You know, I think when we see the proposals and everything that's coming out, the state seems to be doing very well this year with agencies growing, while we have school districts, cities, counties, and families needing to tighten their belts. And so this amendment would reorder the priorities, putting local governments number 1. Number 2 would be higher ed business, or schools, businesses, and consumer-owned utilities, or rural co-ops or municipals. Next on the list would be the investor-owned utilities, then the state, and then nonprofit agencies would be next. The state and the nonprofits, when we look at all the proposals that are coming forward this year, are doing very well with a lot of things. So I believe that this priority list, reorganized in this way, would be the best use of distributing the money to those who are actually going to be most in need and would provide the most benefits. We already heard about grid resiliency as being one of the options, and I think that when we look at the consumer-owned and the investor-owned utilities being higher on the list, it would allow for those projects to be on that priority list higher, knowing the need for that, Mr. President. So with that, I would ask that members support the A1 amendment.
Senator Klein.
Mr. President, I request a roll call.
Roll call, requested roll call granted. Senator Friends to the A1 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Rarick, on 2 levels. First of all, for bringing the amendment to me beforehand. Members, it always helps when the author of the bill can see the amendments. I want to compliment Senator Rarick on that form. I'd ask members to vote no on the amendment. Here's the reason. First of all, the formula funds simply say in the federal bill, if your state spends this much, we will award this much. It's not like a grant application where you have to make out the quality of the project. We're simply going to get that money, and I think that's the best place for us to start. I also like the ordering, Mr. President, of the utilities and of the other entities in their priority. I do think, Senator Rarick, you raised the right question, which is who's this money going to go to, and I look forward to working with members of both parties on that issue as we go forward. Having said that, members, with my thanks again to Senator Rarick, I would ask for a no vote on the A1 amendment.
Any additional discussions on the A1 amendment? Seeing none, the Secretary will take the roll. Senator Rasmussen, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Members, please vote. Senator Hurd, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, I'd like to report nay for Senator Dietzit.
I'm sorry, Senator.
I'd like to report nay for Senator Dietzit.
Senator Dietzit votes no.
And nay for Senator McCune.
Senator McEwen votes no.
And nay for Senator Mitchell.
And Senator Mitchell votes no.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There have been 23 ayes and 34 noes. The A1 amendment is not adopted. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I would like to offer the A50 amendment. 5-0.
Senator Rarick offers the A50 amendment. The Secretary will report the A50 amendment.
Senator Rarick moves to amend House File Number 1656 as follows. Page 3, after line 15, insert. This is the A50 amendment.
Senator Rarick to your A50 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the other concerns that came up by adopting the new language that we did is on lines 4.7 to 4.9. And with that, there was a provision that no entity could receive more than $15 million through this process. But what we've put in when we took the House language is that the Commissioner of Commerce can keep more than 15% for the agency, or more than $15 million for the agency. And it raises a concern, and we've talked with some of the nonpartisan staff. Depending on how that's interpreted, Mr. President, the state could, in essence, get 100% of this money, not allowing other entities to be in the running for any of it. And because we're on a first-come, first-served basis, if the state has their proposals all ready and come forward with a bunch of requests, they could get everything and leave everyone out. So the A50 amendment is saying that a minimum of 30% of this money must go to the groups included in with higher education, consumer-owned utilities, and businesses. Another 15% minimum must go to investor-owned utilities, and 20% minimum must go to local political subdivisions, so that we know that there is somewhat of an even distribution of this money and not all of it is going to end up going to the state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Klein.
President, I request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Friends to the 850 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you once again, Senator Rarick, for bringing this amendment to me. I think these are topics we should be asking, which is, again, how's the money spent? I would ask members to vote no. I did speak with the Commissioner of Commerce about this. The main concerns, members, would be, one, we cannot control which Minnesotan entities apply for which grants. Therefore, a hard and fast limit by percentage terms seems to threaten some of those that would say otherwise meritorious projects, but they simply don't conform. But I think the greatest concern, and I didn't just hear this from the commissioner, I heard this from members, is we're in a hurry, Mr. President. We're close to a year behind some other states that are just tanning our backsides in seeking these federal funds. And if we put a delay so that we can meet certain artificial percentages, we run the risk that in our own districts, grantees will be getting a hold of us saying, I would have qualified for this funding, but for the requirements in the A50 amendment. So while I appreciate, Mr. President, that we're asking where's the money going, I would ask members to vote no with respect on the A50 amendment. Thank you very much, members.
Any additional discussions on the 850 amendment? Seeing none, the secretary will take the roll. Senator Rasmussen, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Members, please vote. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, I'd like to report nay for Senator Dietzig.
Senator Dietzig votes no.
I'd like to report nay for Senator McEwen.
Senator McEwen votes no.
And nay for Senator Mitchell.
And Senator Mitchell votes no.
Thank you.
All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 23 ayes and 34 noes. The A50 amendment is not adopted. Any additional discussion? Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll give this one more shot. I would like to offer the A3 amendment.
Senator Rarick offers the A3 amendment. The secretary will report the amendment.
Senator Rarick moves to amend House File Number 1656 as follows. Page 4, line 19, after the period, insert. This is the A3 amendment.
Senator Rarick, to your A3 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, we've had a little bit of discussion here about needing to get this money out to different groups, and we might have groups that have a good project that potentially could miss out. But I think one of the things that we also have to consider is that we don't want to rush through and just, as this bill has before us, it's basically a first come, first serve. So the large groups that have staff, and if they've already been looking at this, think, hey, you know, I think the legislature is going to do this, and if they have their proposals all ready to go, they're going to be first in line, and they're going to get their projects funded, whether they're the most worthy or not. And a lot of these smaller groups, even though there's funding in here for them to get assistance to put forward applications to get grants, the money could be all spoken for by the time they get that assistance, get their grants done, in place, and sent in. So this amendment would be putting a 90-day application period in place that everybody who puts in an application within that first 90 days would be considered having been applied at the same time, and we would go to that priority list to see who's the most worthy for that money. And I think one of the reasons we really need to consider this amendment, Mr. President, is when we look back at the history of how a lot of these federal funds have been administered and distributed, we have seen a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. And this one, as written, Mr. President, that it would just go out on a first-come, first-served basis, really has the potential of that waste or abuse to it, that we're not going to get to those best projects, or a group is going to fraudulently meet the federal requirements and get in line to get the money, and we won't really have that ability to compare those projects to maybe the small rural co-ops or things like that. So this 90-day application period would allow for many small groups to have time to get their application put together and to compete on an even basis with other groups that were ready and have their applications ready to go or can get it done sooner. And I do believe, with what we've seen in the last couple of years and how federal money has gone out, I know there are reports in here, Mr. President, but a report comes too late. The money is already out the door, and it's already to people who were not the best applicants. So I would ask that we would consider this A3 amendment. Again, you know, we've adopted the House language, Mr. President, without adopting one of these amendments. We pass this today, it goes straight to the governor. We do not get to continue to work on some of these tweaks that we've been saying. These are great concepts, these are ideas that we should talk about. That bus is gone. We missed that opportunity. Unless we adopt this amendment, we can have those discussions. And in the end, you may decide the House language is better, and in conference committee within a week that could be adopted and passed through. I don't think there is the urgency that 1 week going to a conference committee we couldn't deal with. Taking this amendment, I think, gives us that ability to talk about how we make sure this money is going to the best groups out there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Klein.
Mr. President, I request a roll call.
Roll call requested. Roll call granted. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, thank you, Senator Rarick, not only for your thoughtfulness on this, but for sharing the amendment with me beforehand. I'd ask members to vote no. This is the similar problem to the previous amendment as I see it. The federal government does not promise to wait 90 days while they have other states compete for these grants. So that a 90-day waiting period, while I do agree that potentially helps some of our less sophisticated grant applicants, runs the risk that those same applicants find out that there's no money there because we waited 90 days when another state didn't. I'd also say to the reporting, that's why we do that. That's why this came up in the Senate Finance Committee this morning. We want accountability. We want members to know that they can tell their constituents, we are watching your tax dollar, and the reporting that's in this adopted language is the right one. Senator Rarick, you said, I want to make sure about the money all being spoken for, and I think that's my concern here, is by putting an artificial delay of 90 days on that, we run the risk that by the time we get there, some of the money will already be spoken for. I do think your point is very well taken about those entities, including our municipal and co-op utilities, that we need to support them as much as possible, and to that extent, I look forward to further conversations. As far as our friends in the House, even if we do adopt an amendment, they could just concur and take it to the governor anyway. I'd ask members to vote no on the A3 amendment for those reasons. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any more discussion before we go to the author of the amendment? Last words, Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I think I get maybe the 90 days is too long, but in conference committee we could have that discussion, and maybe it would be 30 days. When I look at the bill and the fact that $15 million can go to helping make the grants, I think we're anticipating that this is going to take a little while. It's not going to be done in 1 or 2 weeks. Otherwise, that number for help for putting the grants together wouldn't be that high. So I don't believe the 90 days is going to put us at risk, but we could continue to have those discussions. And it would be fabulous if we would take this amendment and then the House would concur, because I believe this is the right step to be taking. But worst case scenario, we take the amendment, we go to conference committee, and we can engage with groups, figure out, is 90 days correct? Is 45 days correct? Is 30 days correct? We could have that discussion with the other body. We could have that discussion with those who are going to be working on this, and we could get it right. Right now, I don't believe this is right. So please, members, vote yes.
Seeing no further discussion, the secretary will take the roll. Senator Rasmussen, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Members, please vote. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, I'd like to report nay for Senator Dietzit,
Senator Dzik votes no.
nay for Senator McEwen,
Senator McEwen votes no.
and nay for Senator Mitchell.
And Senator Mitchell votes no.
Thank you.
Members, please vote. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 24 ayes and 34 noes. The A3 amendment is not adopted. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the A51. Members, this will sound familiar to you.
Senator Nelson offers the A51 amendment, and the secretary will report the A51 amendment.
Senator Nielsen moves to amend House File number 1656 as follows. Page 3, line 19, after include, insert, but are not limited to. This is the A51 amendment.
Senator Nelson, now to your A51 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment does the two things I mentioned earlier. Members, this is in regarding to grant awards and providing grant development assistance. The amendment before you, the A51, does two things. One, it inserts the word but not limited to. So in other words, includes but not limited to. Add those 5 words. And then secondly, members, it also deletes the specific West Central Initiative Foundation and replaces that with Minnesota Initiative Foundations. I'd encourage a green vote. Let's make sure that we are not artificially limiting who can get grant assistance.
Senator Klein.
Mr. President, I request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Nelson, for the spirit of what you're trying to do. I'd ask members to vote no. I see a problem with both half of the amendment. First of all, the bill is crafted with input from both the House and the Senate on who is named as far as the initiative grant. When we say but are not limited to, that's too wide open. I don't recommend it. The second part says delete Initiative Foundation and insert Minnesota Initiative Foundation. Again, I think the way it's written originally is the better language, and I would ask members to vote no on the amendment on that basis. Thank you, Senator Nelson, and thank you, Mr. President.
Seeing no additional questions, the secretary will take the roll.
Mr. President,
Senator Nelson.
do I get to respond?
I didn't see that you wanted to respond.
Oh.
Would you like to respond?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's wait. Senator Nelson will be the last word. Any additional comments before we give the author the last comment? Seeing none, Senator Nelson to the A51 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I believe both of these pieces are incredibly important, but in order to try and help pacify the author who is asking for a no vote on both of these provisions, which would expand just the grant assistance to other initiative foundations, not just the West Central Initiative Foundation. So with that, Mr. President, I would divide the amendment between line 1.3 and 1.6.
The secretary will report the division.
Senator Nelson moves to amend House File number 1656 as follows. This would be lines, Senator Nelson divides the A51 amendment as follows, and the division would occur between lines 1.3 and 1.4.
Senator Nelson, which portion would you like for us to... I think I did something right. Thank you there. Senator Nelson, which portion would you like for us to vote on first?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like us to vote on the second part of the bill, which is the initiative foundations. So rather than limiting this just to the West Central Initiative Foundation, this portion of the amendment, members, would allow grant assistance for all 6 of our Minnesota Initiative foundations, which cover the entire state. So I encourage you, members, to vote for your districts. Please, let us not limit the grant assistance to just one Minnesota Initiative Foundation, and I do ask for a roll call.
Senator Klein. Senator Frentz to the division, or you're okay? And before you do that, we need to re-report the division just to make sure we get it right. All right? The secretary will report the division.
Senator Nelson has requested a division of the A51 amendment as follows. On page 1, line 2, the first part of the amendment would include the language that reads, page 3, line 19, after include, insert, but are not limited to. The remainder of the amendment would include, or the other divided portion of the amendment would include the remainder of the language in the A51 amendment.
All right, just so now that we got the division right, Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask members to vote no.
Thank you, Senator Frentz. Senator Westrom, only to the division. The first part of the division. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm wondering if Senator Frentz would yield for a question.
Senator Frentz, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, Senator Frentz, I've been listening to the debate on the whole bill, and earlier Senator Nelson brought this issue up about making it more broad, and your response to her was that it was a good point and you think it would improve the bill, and I guess I'm a little puzzled why you're opposed to this now. What has changed in the last 15 minutes since you had initially answered to her question that inquired about this part of the bill, that she now has an amendment to try to improve and make it better? And so I guess if you could shed a little more light on this. I thought this was going to be a friendly amendment, and I'm trying to figure out what the problem would be, because 15 minutes ago it seemed like you were supportive and thought this was an improvement that we could make to the bill. So if you could address that, I think it would be helpful for those of us listening.
Senator Frentz, to the question, we are dividing the A51, and it's the first part of the first aspect that she wants divided and voted on. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Westrom. The answer is a sharper focus on why we included the language that we did the first time. We have regional development organizations eligible for this technical assistance. These grants are for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the list that we made was the right list, in my opinion, in the language that's originally in there. I do think Senator Nelson is asking the right question, which is, do we want to have everybody in Minnesota have an equal opportunity? I don't think, though, that we want to broaden the language at this point, and for that reason, Senator Westrom, Senator Nelson, and Mr. President, I ask for a no vote on the amendment as divided. Thank you.
Members, and just so that we are clear on what is being requested, if you're looking at the A51 amendment, Senator Nelson asked us to divide the amendment, and that lines 1.2, 1.3, she wants to be voted on second. The first portion of the amendment that she wants voted on is lines 1.4 and 1.5. That's my understanding. Is that correct, Senator Nelson?
Correct, Mr. President. Exactly.
So now we are going to deal with what is the second portion of the amendment first, just so that we are all clear. Senator Nelson, you will have the last word before we vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do appreciate the discussion, members, and I am a little shocked to think that we would call out one initiative foundation and not say all Minnesota Initiative Foundations. And just to make sure the public is very clear and that we're very clear, this is not about awarding grants. This is about simply providing grant assistance, allowing all of those initiative foundations to be eligible to apply for grant assistance. So I think this is incredibly important. I understand from the previous discussions that there's somehow some concern that we just have to accept this House file that came over so it can go right to the governor's desk. Well, members, I reject that. This is the Minnesota Senate. It is not our job to rubber stamp what comes over from the other body, nor should we be afraid to make something from the other body better, and that certainly will better support members all across this state, their constituencies. So, members, I do encourage a yes vote. I believe I've asked for a roll call.
Roll call was requested and roll call has been granted. Members, we're going to vote on the second part of the division as reported by the Secretary. The Secretary will take the roll. Senator Rasmussen, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, Senator Dizek votes nay.
Senator Dizek votes no.
Senator McCune votes nay.
Senator McEwen votes no.
And Senator Mitchell votes nay.
And Senator Mitchell votes no.
Thank you.
Members, please vote. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There have been 28 ayes and 35 noes. The amendment is not adopted. Now we are now on the second part, which is the first part of the amendment. Seeing no further questions, a roll call was requested and a roll call granted. The Secretary will take the roll. Members, please vote. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, Senator Dizek votes no.
Say it again.
Senator Dizek votes no.
Senator Dizek votes no.
Senator McCune votes no.
Senator McEwen votes no.
Senator Mitchell votes no.
Senator Mitchell votes no. Senator Rasmussen, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Members, please vote. All senators having voted who... All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 28 ayes and 35 noes, the A51 amendment as divided does not pass. Any additional discussion? Third reading. Oh, did you want to speak now or after the third reading? Now? Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wondering if the author would yield a question.
Senator French, will you yield for a question? He will yield for a question. Senator Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator French, reading the bill, there's a portion of the bill on the bottom of page 3, line 3.31. It talks about disadvantaged communities and gives the ability for the commissioner at their discretion to decide whether or not they will grant a 100% match rather than a 50% match to selected communities, both according to, and as I read, Senator French, the definition of disadvantaged community in the bill, I see frankly, I see a bill that's not ready for prime time, Senator Frentz. The definition on page 1 on the bottom of disadvantaged community, I'll read it to you, members, has the meaning given by the federal agency dispersing federal funds. Okay, so my question, Mr. President, to Senator Frentz, the first one would be, which agencies are dispersing federal funds?
Senator Frentz to the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Drazkowski, for engaging on this very important bill. First of all, Mr. President and Senator, there is a definition of disadvantaged communities in the bill. Second, it's the Department of Commerce that will be administering the competitiveness funds.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I would thank you, Senator Frentz. Would the author continue to yield, Mr. President?
Will you yield again, Senator Frentz? He will yield. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Senator Frentz, why didn't you actually include in the bill the reference to what that definition is, either in federal law or federal administrative rule?
Senator Frentz to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. I believe the language of the bill, although it's not in front of me like it was 2 minutes ago, is to the federal agency responsible. So as you know, the silos of the federal grants under the IIJA and the IRA are through different departments, energy, et cetera, and they have their definition of disadvantaged communities in there. And I believe the bill in front of us does refer to that agency that has jurisdiction over that silo. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Drazkowski.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I'm not getting a real specific answer here, Mr. President, but members, what the language says in the definition on the bottom of page 1 is whatever the federal agency says the definition is, that's the definition of disadvantaged communities. That's what it says in the bill. Now, we're not even sure which agencies are involved. I heard the Department of Energy, and I was online, members, trying to look up and find out what type of definitions that they might have. I found the beginning of a trail there. I heard Senator Frentz talk about the Department of Commerce. They might be one of the granting federal bureaucracies that are involved in these matches that are being brought forward in the bill. They may have a definition, or they may have multiple definitions, is what I'm worried about, Mr. President. We don't know if it's a definition of the secretary of the agency. We don't know if it's a definition of, that's in federal law. We don't know if it's a definition that's in a particular part of administrative rule that the federal agency developed according to this particular program. We don't know what it is, because all the language says, Mr. President, is a disadvantaged community has a meaning given to the federal agency dispersing federal funds. That's all it says. So it could be a multitude of definitions within one of these huge bureaucracies, Mr. President. This is not a well-written bill. And so, members, I'll go on to the rest of what I saw and dissected in my reading of this bill. And that is that a disadvantaged community, we don't know which community's members that is. Members, we're going to be voting on this bill. In your communities may get 100% match, or they may get 50% match on a grant that comes. This bill inherently discriminates against some communities in our state. It's right there on the bottom of page 3, members. And we are voting on language, and we don't know which language that this, or which communities, Mr. President, that this bill discriminates against, but it's clear it discriminates against some communities and treats some twice as good as others. And I heard the author of the bill, Mr. President, earlier say that Minnesota should be treated equally. All communities should be treated equally. Well, this does not do it, Mr. President, and we're going to actually be voting on a bill that contains language, and we're not going to know which communities we're discriminating against if we vote yes on this bill. That's the problem I have with the language in the bill, Mr. President. Lastly, and I've made this argument in the past, Mr. President, we are in the bill also transferring almost unlimited power in this area to the executive branch. If we look at line 3.32 on the bill, it says the commissioner may award up to 100% of the required match funds to a disadvantaged community. It doesn't say and direct the executive branch on how to treat an disadvantaged community. Of course, Mr. President, depending on which definition they use, which could be tens or 20s or hundreds of different definitions within one of these huge bureaucracies. We don't know because the bill doesn't direct us there. But once the commissioner decides which definition he or she is going to use, they have the discretion to either follow this or not. Why, members, would we again transfer our legislative authority to the executive branch? This is more lazy legislating, Mr. President, that is happening here in the Minnesota Senate, and it also adds to the complication discrimination in the bill. Mr. President, I would move an oral amendment on 3.32 of the bill to strike the word may and insert the word shall.
The Secretary will report the oral amendment.
Senator Drazkowski moves to amend House File number 1656 as follows. On page 3, line 32, delete may and insert shall.
Senator Drazkowski, to your oral amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, members, this will correct at least the last point I made. It will say, we as a legislature, if indeed our desire is to have whichever definition of disadvantaged community or wherever that definition comes from, to have that be one of the criteria in discriminating according to how this bill is written. If that's what we want to do in the bill, Mr. President, let's tell the executive branch to do it the way that we, the representatives of the people of Minnesota, in our legislative capacity, want them to do it. That's what we're supposed to do. So, Mr. President, this would accomplish it. It would actually be much clearer. It wouldn't be an abdication of our responsibility, and it won't be transferring our authority to the executive branch and allowing them to yet become more and more powerful than they are now in the separation of government that we have here, separation of powers here in the government of the great state of Minnesota. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Klein.
Mr. President, I request a roll call.
Roll call requested, roll call granted. Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Drazkowski. I would ask members to vote against the amendment for two reasons. First of all, we want the discretion in the Commissioner of the Department of Commerce. That's someone who's worked on a daily basis on this bill and will help us maximize the amount of money from the federal government. Second of all, should vote no because this is exactly what you're talking about, Senator Drazkowski. Legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branch, three co-equal pieces of government, and legislature should not be telling the executive branch how to make decisions any more than the executive branch should be telling us how to make ours. Thank you, Mr. President.
I want to just make sure no one else wants to speak, so you can be last, Senator Drazkowski. Any other discussion? Once we go to Senator Drazkowski, we will take the roll. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I encourage a yes vote. If we leave this in the bill, Mr. President, we are only having yet another layer of discrimination that we have in the bill, and that is giving the commissioner the ability to discriminate within the multitude of the interpretations of disadvantaged community that we give to them in what will become yet the new law. So not only does the bill itself discriminate against what I could expect would be a large amount of Minnesota, but we don't know which, for those of us who are going to vote yes on this bill, we don't know which communities we're going to discriminate against. And on top of that, Mr. President, we are allowing the executive branch to discriminate within those areas that are being treated preferentially within this bill. Yet another tier and layer of discrimination. We don't want or need that in the bill, and I encourage a yes vote on the oral amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Secretary will take the roll on the oral amendment. Senator Rasmussen, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, I'd like to report Dizek vote nay.
Senator Dizek votes no.
Senator McCune vote nay.
Senator McEwen votes no.
And Senator Mitchell votes nay.
Senator Mitchell votes no. Members, please vote. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There have been 29 ayes and 34 noes. The oral amendment is not adopted. Any additional discussion? Third reading.
House File Number 1656, a bill for an act relating to energy, establishing grant programs to enhance the competitiveness of Minnesota entities in obtaining federal money for energy projects.
Third reading. Any discussion? The order will be Senator Gruenhagen to Senator Rarick, and we will end with Senator Friends. Senator Gruenhagen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, members, you know, I really still am concerned about this EMP that we talked about, whether natural or from an enemy. You know, we just had a Chinese balloon float over the entire United States. And if that would have contained something like that, it could have knocked out electrical and electronic in an instant and put us back into the late 1800s. So I'd encourage Senator Friends and your party to consider a comprehensive study. I do appreciate there's $250 million of possible grants to look at cybersecurity, but we need an overall assessment of our electrical grid and some of the dire consequences of if something would happen like that. And it's not outside the realm of possibility. The other thing I brought up, members, in the Energy Committee is that I brought up that a few years ago I was traveling down the road and I heard a solar engineer being interviewed about solar energy here in our country. And he basically said that any solar panels north of Oklahoma are not economically viable. In other words, you're spending more money than what it actually brings in, besides undermining our baseload electricity. Well, I shared that in the Energy Committee, and there was an individual listening, or who was there, I'm not sure which. He was a retired Xcel Energy plant manager, and he sent me an email. He was a mechanical engineer, and he sent me an email that had a copy of a map from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory here in this country, and you can look it up. But basically, the map shows that the only place that solar energy is economically viable to a certain degree is in our deep southwest, New Mexico, Arizona, parts of California. The rest of the country, it is suspect. And in Minnesota and along the northern part of our country, it's absolutely a boondoggle. Okay, so we're spending millions of dollars on this, solar gardens and windmills, and it really is a waste of money. Besides the environmental consequences of cleaning this mess up down the road, undermining our baseload electricity, and driving up the cost exponentially. So members, I think it's important for you to document that this actually works in this area. Again, according to that information and the former plant manager of Xcel Energy, it doesn't. And I know there's certain individuals on the National Renewable Energy Lab that have made certain statements, but this is excellent documentation from an expert who deals on this. So members, we need to make some adjustments to SF4 that passed, and understanding that this solar viability does not work, and we're spending millions of dollars driving up the cost of electricity, undermining our baseload electricity on a boondoggle that has to be cleaned up one day. Members, I appreciate the $250 million for the cybersecurity in here, but members, we're going the wrong direction, in so much of this area. I can't vote yes on this bill, and I encourage each of you to vote no also. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Matthews, before I go to Senator Rarick. Senator Matthews, Senator Rarick, and then Senator Friends. Senator Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I had to get up and discuss some of what we've heard on this bill. It's our first day back from our Easter Passover break. We've got about 5 or 6 weeks left in the session, and we're setting the tone with how this first bill is getting presented. 6 weeks before Democrats blow the entire surplus in one fell swoop here in one session. And our first bill that we have up here comes out with platitudes about bipartisanship and how wonderful Minnesotans believe it is when we work together. And a Republican stands up and makes a point, and the response comes back, you asked a very good question, you made an excellent point. Well, good. Here's an amendment that will do just that, to make sure that we incorporate that excellent point that was made. Oh no, we can't have that. The way the bill is written now is the right way for this bill to go forward, over and over and over again. And then finally, on the last question, I had to get up and respond to the last amendment that was made about how this bill, make no mistake about it, members, this is abdicating constitutional responsibility to the executive branch and to unelected bureaucrats in government. And the response came back saying, well, yes, we have 3 equal branches and no branch tells the other branch what to do. That would be true, except that the Constitution says that the power of the purse resides with the legislature. And this bill is abdicating that responsibility with these grants to an unelected bureaucrat at their sole discretion. Members, I have pocket constitutions sitting at my front desk at my office back in the state office building. I would encourage any of you that needs one or needs a refresher, come by, pick up a copy. Please read through it. Please study it carefully. You all raised your right hand on the first day of session and swore an oath to defend and uphold that Constitution. So come by and make sure that you understand the proper role of government and the proper role of the legislature and how we're supposed to act co-equally with the other branches of government. And some of you clearly need that refresher here. This bill is giving much of this responsibility out to other agencies. And there was no, and not only to state agencies, but as was brought out, we're putting in here definitions of whatever a federal agency will determine any definition will be for this particular category at any time. And the fact that we have a failure here on this floor to even consider the smallest amendments to say, hey, can we clarify that? Hey, can we put the specific language in there that says that here's what a definition could be and have that strong and straightforward and engrossed right here in the language? Well, no, we can't do that. Comes back the response. Members, this overall bill is, the goal stated was going after federal money and federal grants available. And as a general rule for my entire time here in the legislature, I do not get excited by the offer of federal money back to the states. I know some of you do. I've seen things that some of my colleagues here have written on social media or other places saying we have to go after federal money whenever we can get at it. I do not jump at each one of those like a fish jumping at every worm or lure that they see. The reason is, Mr. President, is because hooks come along with those lures. What that is more, what is the stronger argument to make in that case is that that's more proof that the federal government is taking too much money away from Minnesota taxpayers to begin with.
And we should fix that problem, just like the state of Minnesota is also taking away too much money from Minnesota taxpayers. That's why we're sitting on this giant pile of money that the majority is about to blow in one fell swoop in one session. And so when we have this going after, here's the way that Minnesotans should get those federal funds back, that is not persuasive to me as here's the hooks that we need to jump at and swallow in order to get this federal money back, because it's just more concrete proof that we have been taking away too much money from Minnesota citizens and Minnesota taxpayers to begin with. And so finally, my final point is looking through and how loose these requirements are. I suspect that most of this money, and we have one report here where we will get to see after the fact where this money went and where it will go, because the requirements are so loosey-goosey in here, and because it's so open-ended and so open to discretion of the agencies, I suspect that we will get a report back that will show most, if not all, of this money going towards nice but frosting level energy projects like solar in other areas, when we're not going after the main strong baseload generation needs of Minnesotans. Where we could be doing so much good with this money, I suspect, I hope I'm wrong, I'd love to be proven wrong on this, but I suspect that a future report that we'll get will show that all of this was spent on icing on the cake, when the legislature this year has been dismantling the underlying cake. We're removing a lot of baseload energy out of this state. We're going to commit ourselves to buying energy off of the grid at whatever price that will be. We have not yet opened the door for nuclear energy in Minnesota, the last clean, reliable baseload generation that's in here. I'd love for, I didn't bring this amendment, but I'd love this to say that some of this money maybe should be earmarked to help us get nuclear generation here in Minnesota, because that would be a strong, tangible, concrete, good use of this money to make sure that Minnesota is set up well into the future with a strong, reliable grid. But the majority in this legislature has had no interest in that. They've had an interest in going after the icing on the cake, go after the niceties, the solar here, which averages about 1% to 2% effectiveness, especially in the cold winter months, and these green projects that are all around. And we pointed out how the state gets to position themselves to be the top priority for getting this money, and then big organizations that have their plans and their grants ready to go will be first at the trough on this first come, first served basis. And there will be nothing left for the little guy that might see this and think they've got a project that could help their small community in a concrete manner. So there's a myriad of things that are wrong with this bill, especially that we can't bring ourselves to change one jot or one tittle, change the dotting of one I or the crossing of one T, because I don't know if it's the other body that has told you to pass this bill as it is. I don't know if it's the governor that said just pass this bill as it is. But what's been clear with the actions on this floor is we're just going to rubber stamp whoever told the majority here to say jump, and the response has been how high, with no changes in this bill. So I'd encourage members to vote no on this bill. This should get sent back to the drawing board. Some of these ideas, which the author openly admitted, are good bipartisan Republican ideas. You need another shot to go back and work at incorporating these things, because so far it has been all talk and no action. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Warrick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I could restate a number of the things that Senator Matthews just said, because I agree with everything that he just stated. So I'm not going to repeat all of that, but I want to talk about a couple of other things, Mr. President. One of the main concerns I have with this bill is the accountability. Right now, as written, this is a first-come, first-served basis. And we've seen the history here in Minnesota with a lot of the federal money that's come in and been handed out, and later we find out that it went to groups that were just not being that responsible with the money, and in some cases, flat out fraudulent. And this bill, as written, has no accountability to make sure that that does not happen once again. The agency will not be held accountable. And as we've seen with others, no one has been reprimanded publicly, no one has lost their job, no one who has voted in the other body for this, no one who will vote in this body for this, has any accountability measures. We have a report that's going to tell us what happened. Or we might have the OLA look into this 3, 4, 5 years down the road and find out there were problems. But folks, Minnesota taxpayers and federal taxpayers deserve more. They deserve that their money be used wisely. The idea that we continue to say Minnesota has to get its fair share of this federal money. I would argue that as a nation, when the federal government puts forward money to be used, it shouldn't be a race to see how much your state gets. It should be a process to find out what are the most worthy projects. We've talked about it. Grid resiliency is absolutely a high priority. But there are no guarantees that any of that will be done with any of this federal money around the country or in Minnesota. Those are the things we should be talking about. If the best projects are not in Minnesota, we should be willing to say the best projects should get the funding. If we have excellent projects, we should be able to get that money over, say, the state of Wisconsin. But that's not how we go about it, Mr. President. And this bill makes it even worse by saying this is just a first-come, first-served basis in Minnesota. Mr. President, I signed on as a co-author of this bill because I believe in the concept. Because there are a lot of things that we could use that federal money to improve the infrastructure here in Minnesota. Unfortunately, the details of this bill fail to provide and distribute those funds properly, in my opinion. We offered amendments today. I believe this is not something that needed to be done this very instant. We could take another week to go to a conference committee, have discussions with the other body, make this right. But that didn't happen. Like a number of other bills that have come through this year, Mr. President, and that's very unfortunate. As a co-author of the bill, I am going to have to ask and recommend that members vote no today, because I believe there are things that should have been changed, should have made better, but that didn't happen. We are the Senate, Mr. President. We should be having these discussions. We should be passing a bill that we believe is right, not having one brought to us from the other body saying, here you go, and you can't change it because we have to get this to the governor as soon as possible. Not only in this bill are we abdicating some of our authority over to a state agency, we are continuing to give away our body's ability to put forward what we believe is right, and we're just accepting what the other body sends us. That's a bad precedent, Mr. President. We could easily take 1 or 2 more weeks to have these discussions, get it done in conference committee, and get this over to the governor. But we didn't do that. So members, I will be voting no, and I would ask that you vote no as well so that we can have these discussions and get this right.
Senator Friends.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. Once again, a robust discussion on the Senate floor. I love it. I think you should vote yes on this bill. Here's some basic information I hope members of both parties are going to consider. North Dakota, $114 million. Wyoming, $1.3 billion. The state of Louisiana, $219 million. State of Kentucky, $316 million. State of Ohio, $75 million. These are states who have passed an act just like the one in front of you and long ago in many cases, Mr. President. Almost a year ago on this floor, we heard members of both parties talk about how important it was to get this going, how necessary these funds were, how we were going to lose opportunities. I remember reading this last year, a quote from the local media: Minnesota state lawmakers must act now or risk losing billions in federal infrastructure funds. June 2nd, 2022. I'd ask you members, what's going on here? How are we getting no votes for a simple matching fund to get money out of the federal appropriations? Those bills are already passed. That horse is out of the barn. It's just a question of whether we get it or it goes to some other state. The things we're going to do with this money are good for every community. They're good for every utility. Generation, carbon capture, transmission, distribution, resiliency, efficiency. When your district gets these grants, I would like you to be able to say, that's good news. I'm glad I voted for that appropriation. As far as the way we administer it, this is the same format and used in these states. And I might just add what you already know. The states I listed who've already passed this, all run by Republican legislatures, all with basically the same language and all with the same appropriation scheme, which is a competitiveness fund. They may not call it that, but they see the value. And the question is not why do those states see the value, members of the Minnesota Senate, but why don't we? I'm asking for you to vote yes for the simple reason that it's good for the state. It's good for our co-ops. It's good for our municipal utilities. It allows us to do things for the electric grid that need to be done, and it provides jobs, jobs, jobs. Mr. President, I appreciate your patience as we had this floor debate. Members, I'm asking you on behalf of your districts, on behalf of resiliency, on behalf of the future of the state for the next generation to vote yes on this. Thank you, members.
Members, the Secretary will take the roll on final passage of House File 1656. Members and those in the gallery, we will have no disruption in the chambers. If there's continued disruption, we will ask the sergeant to remove them. Members, please vote. Senator Hurd, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Mr. President, I'd like to report Senator Dietze, vote aye.
Senator Dietze votes aye.
Senator McCune votes aye.
Senator McCune votes aye.
Senator Mitchell votes aye.
Senator Mitchell votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Thank you.
Senator Jasinski, for those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Miller votes aye.
Senator Miller votes aye. All senators having voted who desires to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. With 39 ayes and 22 noes, the bill passes and its title agreed to. Members, we will now proceed to the 13th order of business, announcements of Senate interest. Without objection, the following senators will be excused from today's session: Coleman, Duckworth, Pratt all day, Lucero from 12 to 12:45, Johnson, Jasinski, Weber, and Housley from 12:15 to 1 o'clock, Lang from 12:15 until the end. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, members, I just rise to offer a thank you and a heartfelt appreciation on behalf of my family and myself. It's great to be back, Mr. President and members, but I just want to express gratitude and heartfelt thanks for all the well wishes, all those that have reached out by text, phone calls, emails from the snowmobile accident that I was in last month. Mr. President, I'm feeling well. It's great to be back. And members, I appreciate all your care, compassionate kindness, and concern. And at the right time in the future, Mr. President, I want to use what I've learned in the last few weeks to help us legislate when we come to other bills dealing with Health and Human Services and some funding, but I'm not going to go into that today. But members, I just want to thank you for your comments and your care over the time I was working remotely and healing. And it's great to be back here, Mr. President. And lastly, I want to just say a great big thank you to the first responders and the healthcare staff that treated me so well. And members, it's great to know that they're there and responding quickly when you need them. And that was the case in my case, and I really appreciate their great professional response from the first firefighter on the scene, guiding everybody else in to the location of the accident, and the healthcare treatment along the way, and those in the facility that was helping me get my strength back. I had just a lot of great, compassionate caregivers, and I'll share more about that in the future, Mr. President, but I want to just say thank you to all that helped out, and it's great to be back. Members, I look forward to our vigorous debates.
Welcome back, Senator Westrom. Senator Klein.
Thank you, members of the Commerce Committee. The Commerce Committee has physically moved locations today to room 1150 in the Senate Office Building. We will meet 15 minutes after adjournment.
Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. President. And, you know, we just passed the HF 1656, the State Competitiveness Fund and Establishment and Appropriation. I've got something to add to that. One of the things that makes us competitive is our education system and our technical education system. And one part of it that I've been involved in is the Minnesota Robotics Competition. I want to personally invite you to the 2023 STEM Day at the Capitol tomorrow, Wednesday, April 12th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. in the Capitol Rotunda. This event showcases educational programs in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics STEM fields. We're excited to welcome the first Upper Midwest Robotics, Minnesota STEM Partnership, the Minnesota Air and Space Forces Association, MnDOT's STEM Outreach Program, High Tech Kids, and the VEX Robotics to participate in this year's event. There'll be a short program at 9 o'clock, and if any of you would like to speak, please let me know, and plan to meet in the rotunda before 9 o'clock. This is something that I and Senator Lopez Franzen started quite some time ago. If you want to keep that tradition alive and stop by to learn more about STEM opportunities and about our efforts to increase program funding for robotics. If you have any questions, please reach out to my legislative assistant, Taylor Spreeman. Thank you.
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to also welcome Senator Westrom back. We've been through similar circumstances and know that recovery is long. But I would like to make sure that everyone knows in the future that all snowmobile jokes will now be taken away from Senator Johnson and myself and now put on Senator Westrom. So thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Finance Committee will meet approximately 2:20 right next door to the Commerce Committee, and I appreciate Commerce Committee moving because we have a lot of members who serve on both committees, so we'll try and accommodate their needs, but we'll meet at 2:20.
Any additional discussions or acknowledgments or announcements of Senate interest? Senator Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate do now adjourn until Wednesday, April 12th at 12 noon.
On that motion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the Senate is now adjourned.